Tank Davis knocks out Frank Martin in devastating fashion. Tank does what Tank always does. In typical Tank fashion, like a predator, he patiently stalks his prey and then wipes them out. He is a seriously bad man. He just has that ability to just shut a man's lights out. I mean, Tank's record speaks for itself. 30 wins and 28 KOs. And don't get me wrong, because Frank Martin, he was no joke himself, because he had 18 fights and 12 knockouts, so he had power as well. And Frank Martin started the fight well. He was getting a lot of success, probably more than he thought. And that probably led to a false sense of security, especially the first 3 rounds. He was picking his punches well, jabbing and moving, and he was getting a lot of success. He couldn't have really had a better start of the fight. He was definitely causing Tank problems, and he was probably fighting it a little bit too easy, and that probably caused Frank to get a little bit complacent. And it's not unusual for Tank to start slow, because that's what he does. He's collecting data, applying the pressure, and eventually he starts to find his range and starts to land. He often gives the early rounds away. He just applies the pressure and collects data. As the fight went on, Frank was still on the ropes just too long. And every time Tank unloaded, he looked dangerous. Like I said, Tank's a slow starter. He likes to feel his way into the fight. He likes to throw certain punches, try different moves, and see how the fighters react. Then he starts to set traps, and then he starts to let his shots go. Despite the success Frank was having, he was being made to work harder than he wanted to, throw punches when he didn't want to. But that's what Tank does. He applies the pressure and makes you work, and he gradually breaks you down mentally. And when fighters feel Tank's power, they're just going to fight or flight mode, and it just drains the battery. Because when you're fighting Tank, you've got to be so alert to make sure you don't get caught with one of his power shots. Because one mistake, one switch off, and it's game over. You could see that Frank was starting to tire. And just to mention at the weigh-in, he did look tight at the weight. He looked drained. And as we know, Tank is very comfortable at the weight. And quite often when fighters are struggling at the weight, in the second half of the fight is when you see the energy levels drop. You could see that Tank could taste blood. And he knew that Frank was struggling with the pressure. You could see that Tank was warming into the fight, gradually growing in confidence, and he started to get more relaxed, dropping his hands, walking forward and countering. Frank Martin was starting to spend too much time on the ropes, and you could see that Tank was setting traps. You could see that the writing was on the wall. In round 8 again, Frank Martin finds himself on the ropes, a place you don't want to be against Tank Davis, not with a man with his sort of devastating power. And he gets caught with a left uppercut, which stuns him, and for good measure, Tank finishes it off with a straight left, and it's game over. When that straight left landed, Tank Davis knew the fight was over, because he turned around, jumped on the ropes and celebrated, because he knew. And he did celebrate with a backflip off the ropes, which was pretty impressive. Tank's knockout stats could rival the likes of Arthur Berbatev, who's got a 100% knockout ratio, because Tank's actually had 30 fights with 28 knockouts, whereas Berbatev's had 20 fights, 20 knockouts. You know, so he's up there with the pound for pound biggest punchers in the world. People always talk about Tank's power, but his IQ is so underrated, because even Frank Martin said in a post-fight interview, it wasn't just Tank's power, it was his speed, his accuracy, the way he sets traps, his adaptability. He made no excuses. He gave Tank all the credit. He was very humble in defeat. Frank Martin definitely showed he belongs at that level. He showed some skill in the fight. Just unfortunately, he came up against a great fighter. And like I said, maybe there was a weight issue in that he was too big for the weight. Maybe he needs to move up. But he can definitely come back from this fight and go on to do great things. So who's next for Tank Davis? A quick mention, Ryan Garcia came to the ring to congratulate Tank. And he was wearing a t-shirt with Tank's #1 fan on it. The guy's crazy. And he was obviously asking for the rematch. And I don't think that fight is necessarily on Tank's radar, but as it goes, if it makes business sense, why not? Both guys are huge stars, so without doubt people would be interested in seeing that fight again, myself included. Both guys have knockout power, so it's going to be a fireworks every time. The problem you've got is finding a weight to fight at, because last time Ryan Garcia got pulled down in weight and they fought at catch weight, and you could see that Ryan Garcia was dead at the weight. And I don't don't think Tank is willing to go up in weight because I don't think he wants to give his advantage away. Ryan is physically getting bigger. You could see when he fought Devin Haney how big he looked. He looked massive next to Devin Haney. Plus with Ryan, he's too busy enjoying himself. You could see at the fight he was drinking. He looked quite bloated. So you just don't know how seriously he's taking the sport. But if the fight was to be made, I would definitely be tuning in. I think the obvious fight next should be Vasiliy Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson. Both great fights, but I think Lomachenko is a little bit past his best. I would have loved to have seen that fight when both guys were in the prime. I'm just not sure how much Lomachenko has got left. I'm just not sure he's got the motivation to fight at the highest level and win. I think the fight most people want to see is against Shakur Stevenson. Both hungry lions, both in the prime. It just makes sense. I think Shakur Stevenson is one of the best fighters out there. He's such a rounded, intelligent fighter. And I think he could give Tank a lot of problems, the way he boxes and moves. And the problem that Tank has got is that he's a slow starter. He gives a lot of early rounds away. And that's a problem if you don't eventually knock your opponent out. You've got to win rounds along the way because both guys, Tank and Shakur Stevenson, are both extremely intelligent fighters. So relying on a knockout punch isn't enough. I'm not saying that Shakur is the better boxer. I'm just saying against him that Tank can't afford to be giving rounds away. Another issue I've got is Tank not being active enough. In the last 5 years, he's been fighting once or twice a year. It's just not enough. Without doubt, he's a great fighter. And he's got the potential to be one of the best pound-for-pound fighters with more activity. Because I've mentioned this before, with the likes of Tyson Fury not being active enough, fighters do themselves an injustice, essentially stopping themselves from reaching the full potential, which is criminal in such talented fighters. Floyd Mayweather releases sparring footage of Tank versus Devin Haney. I don't know the full story behind the beef between Tank and Floyd Mayweather. I just know that Floyd Mayweather has this uncanny ability to draw attention on himself, keep himself in the limelight, and cast a shadow on other people. It's funny because at the start of Tank's career, Floyd was really bigging him up. And I know that Tank has said it's down to jealousy because Floyd is scared that he's going to overtake his achievements. And that definitely wouldn't surprise me. And if you haven't seen the footage, it looks like Devin Haney is getting the better of Tank. But what I always say is, people don't know the backstory behind sparring. Not everybody spars well every session. Sparring is sparring. It's about learning and practicing things that you've been working on. It's not necessarily about winning a spar. And at the end of the day, it's not really meant for the public to see. You have good days and you have bad days. It's about how you perform on fight night under the lights. But this is just about Floyd Mayweather trying to make Tank look bad. The simple fact is, Floyd Mayweather misses being number one and being in the limelight. He can't stand other people getting the attention he once did. And it's worked because people are now talking about him. He'd be loving it. Mission accomplished. I hope that Tank fights Shakur Stevenson next. But I'd also be happy seeing him fight Vasiliy Lomachenko. Both great fights. Who do you think that Tank should fight next? Please like and subscribe and go watch this video next.